Hi everyone, this is Shannon Williams from Rancher Labs. Thanks a lot for joining us today for our monthly Rancher meetup. We've got a fun meetup this week, and it's going to be focused on container monitoring. We're going to be baking off Prometheus, Sysdig, and Datadog, and we're really excited to see so many people join. It looks like this is going to be a really popular topic, so I think we're gonna hopefully give you a lot of really good information. As usual, I'm Shannon Williams. I'm one of the founders here at Rancher. I'm joined by my co-founder Darren Shepard. We run these meetups every month. Darren, are you ready to talk container monitoring?
Yep.
All
I'm
right.
excited to be here.
The reality is, though, for Darren and I are really not going to be doing a lot of the talking today. It's we've got effectively three contestants here on the Great Container Bake Off. We're going to be hearing from two Rancher engineers, Jan Bruder and Bill Maxwell. Jan is based in Berlin. Jan, are you there?
Yep. Hi, everyone.
Awesome. And Bill is just joining us in a second, but he'll be on. A lot of you probably know Bill. He's been on dozens of our meetups. Bill's going to be talking about Sysdig. And then we have a special guest, Ed Marshall, here. Ed is based in the UK and is here with Infinity Works. Ed, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Shannon. Yeah, all good to go here.
Awesome. Ed has been a long time part of the Rancher community. He built the Prometheus catalog item with his team there at Infinity Works. I think he's attended and spoken on other meetups. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. We're going to be talking about really best practices for container monitoring. We're going to dive into it and hopefully give you a really good understanding of how these different systems work. First things first, if you've not attended one of these before, I just would let everyone know what we're doing today is really meant to be a meetup, not a webinar, and it's very different than your typical company webinar where we do marketing pitches and talk about how great everything is. For this, it's a bit of an open-ended thing. We try to move quickly, but we don't set a timeline on how long it takes. Sometimes we go for an hour, sometimes we go for an hour and a half. Sometimes we go for 2 hours, and the reason for that is, we try to dive into big topics. We cover lots of different things. Questions are always welcome. So, and we get lots of them. People are already asking questions. People ask questions kind of constantly through the meetup, and we do our best to answer them all either through the chat or we'll ask them out loud. We'll ask them to the presenters as we go. There are no bad questions. People attend this with all different levels of skill and understanding on containers. So ask your question. Don't hesitate. The other big difference between this and a typical webinar is we do demos a lot, and because of that, things break a lot. So be patient. We'll we rehearse all these things. We try to bake stuff halfway and then show you what the finished goods look like. But at the same time, we rely on the internet. We rely on software working as it's supposed to. We rely a lot of times on early versions of software to show you cool new features. So stuff breaks. Be patient. It'll all come together. We'll explain it. We're pretty upfront when something's breaking. Usually know very quickly. Oh crap, it's not working how I thought it would. So it should be a lot of fun. The other thing is, people join us from all over the world, and unfortunately, we don't do these meetups in person. We do them on the web, and so we don't always get to meet one another. We don't get to know each other. And one of these days we're going to find a better solution than just using GoToWebinar. But for now, one of the ways we're able to talk is using Twitter. So if you're attending and it's your first meetup, introduce yourself, take a picture, show us what you're doing while you are on the meetup. Hashtag Rancher Meetup is how we talk to each other. If you've got questions, if you've got opinions, fire them out there if you want. Now, a lot of the conversation happens in the question bar as well here inside the app. So we go back and forth. We post a lot of things. If you have opinions, feel free to state them. I'll push them out to everyone so people can see them. If you have something you want to keep private, feel free to just put private in there, and I won't mention it. I'll respond to you directly one-on-one. But I'd love to see more faces. Last meetup, I saw definitely one of my more nerve-wracking posts was the one right in the middle that Andreas posted about listening to the meetup while he's driving down the freeway. So you know what? Whatever works, man. Wherever you are as a team, as an individual, though, definitely take your picture, show it out there. We're excited to see what you're all doing. Okay, so for today's agenda, I'm going to just do a real quick introduction to what we're going to be covering and talk a little bit about the content. I'll do a couple quick slides on Rancher for those of you who don't know who we are. Then Jan is going to be talking about Datadog, and he'll go through, give us 3 slides or so on Datadog, what it does, and how it works. Jan built the Datadog catalog items in Rancher. He's he's a big fan, so he will be effectively pitching Datadog to you as a user. And next up will be Ed, who will talk Prometheus. And again, Ed is an everyday user of Prometheus. He loves it. He is a big fan, and we'll talk about why Prometheus is a great option for monitoring containers and monitoring all of your infrastructure. Finally, Bill will join, and he is our resident Sysdig expert. He uses Sysdig all the time and has a lot of personal experience with it, and we'll be talking about Sysdig. If you have detailed questions, we'll do our best to answer all of them. But I know that there are probably going to be people from these companies on the call as well. I saw at least a note from somebody from Sysdig and Datadog saying they were going to join. So if there's a question you have and we can't answer it, we can always throw it out to the community and probably get an answer from somebody who works at one of these companies as well. We have more than 900 plus registrants for today's meetup. It's going to be packed. So lots of opinions, probably lots of other users out there. We'll end with a little bit of a straw poll, just what product are you interested in testing, and ask everyone to give us their opinion. So we'll throw that out there, see what people are excited about. I know a lot of you are probably already using some of these tools. And then during this session, we get lots of questions on all sorts of topics about containers, about Rancher, about Kubernetes, about infrastructure services. If you're asking a question and I'm not getting to it quickly, it may be something that's just a little bit that either we're about to address or we're going to have to circle back to later in the session. So unfortunately, I can't kind of like send a note that says, "Ooh, I'll hit this in a little bit," or I lose the question. So again, technical limitations, but be patient. I'll be getting to all the questions. We don't leave until we answer everything. So we'll do our best to answer all of your questions. All right, just a real quick, a couple slides on Rancher Labs for those of you who don't know us. Rancher is an open source software company. We build 2 primary projects. One is Rancher, which we're going to be talking about a little bit today, and Rancher is an open source platform that manages container clusters. And we build Rancher OS, which is a lightweight OS distro for running Docker minimally on your host. It's a 50 meg implementation that runs Docker as PID1. The idea behind Rancher is really simple. It's building an open source framework to make everything easy about running containers. Meaning, we implement multiple orchestration tools. We deploy environments on any infrastructure. We lay down a set of infrastructure services that are swappable and can be plugged in, and we give you all of the user management, UI, application catalogs, and everything you need to start leveraging and running Kubernetes, Swarm, Cattle, Mesos, any of these schedulers in production. So Rancher is incredibly popular. There's more than 1 million downloads. I think it's more than 1.5 million now. More than 10 million agents have been pulled and deployed. There's there's users all over the world in every country. It's about a 2-year-old project. I think we released 1.0 though, the first real production grade release in March. And best of all, everything in it's open source and free, and you're welcome to use it to your heart's content, to fork it, to do with it as you like. It's a true Apache open source license, and you can really do what you like. The whole system is really designed to be multi-tenant as well, so it's usually used by groups or teams to roll out a container management platform for their groups to get together. And you can spin up multiple clusters and set access control policies for who's allowed to access dev and prod and testing and staging, etc. environments, or separate environments between groups. So really easy. If one team wants to use Mesos for for some type of big data workload, it works great for that. If another team wants to run Cattle or Kubernetes to run a production web app, works great for that. So that's what we do. We pay the bills by selling support services and training and consulting services for Rancher. So if you ever need help, you can just contact us through our website or get support on the Rancher products. We work really closely with all of our customers as well. So that's Rancher. Enough about that. More importantly, let's get to the Bake Off. So I don't know if everyone knows what the Great British Bake Off is, but I lived in London for a couple years, and it's a really great thing where basically, people compete to prove who's the best baker in Britain, and it's on TV. It just ended, I think, yesterday or the day before this year, but it's a lot of fun, and it basically, kind of I was thinking it would be a really fun approach to use for kind of comparing some of the popular monitoring tools that we're seeing people deploy on Rancher with containers. And this is an area that from the very beginning has always been of a lot of interest. We've covered it in past meetups, a little bit. We've touched on it. We talked about Prometheus in a past meetup, quite a bit in one session. We've done some meetups with Sysdig in the past, so we've talked about a few of these things. And we have a lot of people interested in container monitoring. I think if you just Google container monitoring, some of the blogs and stuff we've written continue to be the most popular sites on the internet. And it's, in a lot of ways, I think it's a great fit with what we do in Rancher. We try to make it really easy for people to roll out, deploy container monitoring solutions. Rancher itself isn't a container monitoring platform. We basically expose stats and let you get access to stats. But when we talk about monitoring, like we're going to be talking about today, we're talking about something a little more advanced. That said, when we first started digging into this, there's 7 or 8 good options out there. I'm highlighting 7, 8 of them here in the slide, but there's even more that kind of come up occasionally. We have an article on our website where we talk about 7 common approaches to monitoring containers, and I think we include all of these except for Semitext, which is a new one that just kind of came in this summer, which looks really exciting and interesting. But in there we talk about kind of the difference between the first 2 of these, Docker Stats and cAdvisor, and the rest, which are more real monitoring tools. And I thought, Darren, if you had a couple minutes, it might be interesting to kind of explain a little bit about the difference between the kind of stats we're gathering in Rancher from Docker Stats and what we've gathered in the past from cAdvisor, and how we use those tools, and also how they're different from a monitoring platform.
Yeah, sure. So historically within Rancher, we've used cAdvisor for a long time, and actually in the next 1.2 release, we're going to be using Docker Stats a lot more. But basically, the idea of these two technologies is that they basically just give you a live, kind of like a live view to the running stats on the host, like how much CPU memory of each container that's being used at the time. So as Shannon was saying, like Rancher in and of itself is not really a monitoring platform. But like if you go into the Rancher UI, you can go and click on a container or a host, and you can see how much resources are being used. And it's pretty much just a live view of what's going on right now. So there's no historical, like there's not like, you can look back and see trends over time, or there's no setting thresholds or alerts and triggers and things like that. So it's just basically just getting the live stats. And so both of these components kind of address that real small use case. cAdvisor is a little bit more, but so I'll first talk about Docker Stats. Like the idea of Docker Stats is that it just gives you a raw live access to the statistics of the container, like what's going on. cAdvisor kind of takes like the next level of, you can get like the live information, but it's also designed to plug into a full monitoring system. So you'll see like with Prometheus, it integrates really well. And so cAdvisor goes a little bit farther beyond Docker Stats, that they aggregate a lot more information about the host than just the individual containers. And then additionally, they have like an API, and it will plug into another component. But again, the idea is with both of these is they're more of the lowest level component to grab the information from the host, but not a monitoring solution in itself. Like for you to really get like a holistic view across your whole cluster or your whole application, or you want to have alerts and like triggers and stuff like that, that's where a monitoring solution comes in.
Awesome, thanks, Darren. And when we do take and bubble up a lot of that visibility in Rancher in terms of what's happening right now, but for ourselves, when we're running our applications, we're using a monitoring tool, and I highly recommend one for anybody who's running production-grade applications in containers. So unfortunately, we couldn't hit on everything, but I would definitely encourage you guys to, in addition to looking at the ones we talked about today, take a look at Scout, at Sensu, at Semitext. I mean, there's other really good solutions out there. The criteria we're going to use do come from, or at least we're going to try to use as we go through this, come from that article we published, more than a year ago, and that continues to be extended and enhanced because it's so popular, and that is the comparison of different monitoring options that Usman wrote for us. And there were 6 things he kind of called out and tried to evaluate these tools on. The first was kind of how easy they are to deploy. How much work goes into setting these things up, customizing to your environment. Some of these obviously are SaaS services. Datadog and Sysdig Cloud are SaaS services. Prometheus isn't. So there's a difference between those. We'll talk about then, what level of detail is actually presented. How granular can I get? What do I know about not just what's happening on the host, but what's actually happening in the container, what's happening at the container network level, the communication between containers. We'll also look kind of higher level. How do you aggregate that? Can you understand relationships between containers? Can you understand relationships of services? One of the powerful things within orchestration tools like Cattle and Kubernetes is they give you the ability to do service discovery and to connect things. So we'll look at sort of aggregation as well. And then, we'll talk about alerting. We'll talk about also how you monitor stuff that's not Docker. It's great to have a tool that does a great job of monitoring Docker. Also great to know a little bit more about your environment as well. So if you can use the same tool for everything, it's certainly appealing. So we'll talk about all of that. We'll at least hit on cost, though. We're not going to be diving into the cost, but we'll compare things that are, we're talking about here about open source projects as well as SaaS services. So there is a difference in the cost of these different tools. So if you haven't already, at some point, and you're really interested in getting more information, definitely read this article. It goes into a lot of depth on these tools as well as more. You can just find it, on our website or anywhere else by Googling, container monitoring, and you'll probably find it, or Docker monitoring, you'll find it. Okay, so one of the things that the last thing I kind of want to talk about before we get started is a lot of what we're going to be demoing today is in the Rancher catalog, and so one of the really cool things about deploying these services is whether you're just deploying agents on all your hosts or you're deploying an entire application stack, you can deploy them very easily into your environments. Some people put those in put the management tools like Prometheus, for instance, and its masters in a separate environment. Well, they'll create a tools environment maybe where they run their CI/CD and their management framework and then deploy their agents, or you can just deploy them in individual services. Just as before we dive into it, I pulled this up to show you kind of live what something like this looks like, because when you come in to deploy a new service, what happens is you're able to come through, and if you're deploying something like Semitext or Sysdig or Datadog, you're going to have a whole bunch of configuration options that the vendor has created. So, they ask you for tokens, they may ask you for specific, containers that you want to or don't want to access, monitor. Some of these will ask you for tags on, if you're doing something with Kubernetes or someone else. So there's a few different configurations. You want to go through these and look at them. Each one is a little bit different. So, if you're looking at something like Prometheus, it's a little bit more complete. It's actually deploying, there's a little less configuration because it's more of a complete, start to top deployment. Whereas if you're coming in and talking to one of the cloud services, there are going to be a lot more of the data, the details that you need to put in. So you're going to need to provide your keys, and you're going to need to decide where you want things to run, etc. So the nice thing is the awesome teams at Datadog and Sysdig and Prometheus, they all contribute to these catalog items. They're for the most part not generated by us. The team at InfinityWorks and the NHS built the Prometheus tool, and it's become really popular with Rancher users. So there's a lot of people out there. If you love something else and you've got another monitoring tool you think would be really relevant, we'd love to have it in the catalog. The catalog is a big open source Git repo that anyone can push stuff to. So without too much further ado, I think we're going to get started and dive into talking about Datadog. So Jan, are you on the call? Jan, you there? You still muted, maybe?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Can you see the screen?
Great. Yes.
All right. So the way we're going to do this, guys, is the first person's going to go. They're going to talk a little bit about the tool that they're presenting. So Jan's going to go through 3 or 4 slides on Datadog, and then he's going to demo from his machine and show you how to deploy and use Datadog.
Yeah, so hello everyone. Let's get started with Datadog. So when I learned about Datadog, what was interesting for me was that they promised to give me a vertical view in my application stacks, starting from the system stats through the Docker daemon stats, and then even to application metrics. And I then thought about how we can make it as easy as possible to allow our users to deploy the Datadog agent in a Ranger environment. And maybe, Shannon, if you could switch to the next slide. Yeah, maybe we're skipping this. Yeah, so Datadog uses an agent-based deploy. You basically have 2 methods to install the agent on your hosts. The first one is the traditional installation, where you install it directly on the host, and it then runs as a process next to the Docker engine. But really the interesting deploy method for Rancher is the Dockerized Datadog agent, because this makes it extremely easy to deploy the agent across all your hosts in your Ranger environment. And just by deploying the agent, this already, without any further configuration, gives you the basic stats, starting from your host resources and also the Docker daemon stats. Can you switch to the next slide, Shannon? So, as I said, you already covered on the host stats side and the Docker engine stats. But then you also want to get visibility in your applications, and this can be quite challenging in a container environment because it's a dynamic environment, and your scheduler, in this case Ranger Kettle, takes care of running the applications, and you don't necessarily know where they're running, neither are you necessarily interested where they're running. So you really want some kind of auto discovery, and the way Datadog does this is it listens to events on the Docker daemon API, and then it checks the names of your Docker images against a list of known images, and then it dynamically configures checks for these applications. So, for example, if you deploy a Redis image in your Ranger environment, Datadog will Datadog will see that image, and then it starts configuring checks, and it will extract the metrics from Redis. And it does this for a couple of applications automatically, without you having to configure anything specifically. But Datadog has a lot of integrations for databases, web servers, key value stores, and it allows you to configure checks for these services as well. You just have to do a little bit of configurations. Basically, you have to tell it what's the name of the image that you're running. So if you have a custom image, custom Redis image, or a custom database image, you have to tell the Datadog agent what's the name of the image and what check it should configure for it. And once you have done that, it will happen dynamically. So as soon as you launch that image on Rancher, Datadog will identify that, and it will set up checks on that application. What I really like about Datadog is that it also has support for more like a push model for metrics. So a lot of people may have applications that have metrics built in. Often, I mean, a very popular method is use statsd by Etsy, which is basically a stats aggregation daemon. And Datadog has their own version of that. They call it the docstatsd. It's basically compatible to statsd but has some extensions. And when you deploy the the Datadog agent in Rancher, each host becomes an aggregator for statsd metrics. And this is really nice. If you have applications that use statsd metrics.
Hey, Jan, you've become a little bit quiet and hard to hear. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So,
thank you.
Okay, so when you deploy the Datadog on Rancher, then each of your hosts becomes a statsd aggregator, and this gives you the possibility to push metrics to it from your applications. And I really like this because that really covers, vertically covers your entire stack, starting from the host stats through the Docker engine and even in the application. And I maybe want to start by talking a little bit about the catalog item that I built for Rancher. And maybe that's a good time. Is there another slide? I don't think so, Shannon. Might be a good idea. Might be a good time to switch to my screen now. Can you see my screen? Shannon, can you see my screen?
Yep. Yeah, I can see your catalog. I can see the catalog.
Okay, great. So this is the catalog item that we built for Datadog. And what this does is it deploys the Datadog image. So this is the standard Datadog image. And we do some extra magic here because the thing you have to know about Datadog is that they rely heavily on the concept of tags for their metrics, and tags allow you to really dive into your metrics. And in Rancher, we have the concept of labels. You're probably familiar with that. So you can add labels to your host to attach some metadata information about them, but you can also add labels to your services and do the same thing. So my idea was, okay, we have the labels in Rancher, and why not leverage that information for the tags in Datadog? And this was really the only problem I had with Datadog, is that they currently don't have a native support for Rancher. They do have one for Kubernetes and for Mesos, I think. So for those orchestrators, they will extract the labels automatically. But for Rancher, they currently don't. So that's why we have another container here in the Datadog catalog. And this container actually queries the Rancher metadata and then extracts the labels information and then passes it to the Datadog agent in the form of tags. So basically it converts the Rancher labels to tags. And when you deploy the stack from the catalog, you can configure which service labels you want to convert as tags, and the same for the host labels. So when you start to monitor your Rancher environment with Datadog, I really recommend to start to make use of the labeling. There are multiple schemes you could apply for your labels. I mean, just some basic labels would be stuff like the region your hosts are running in, the size, the type of the hosts. Datadog actually extracts this kind of some part of this information from the cloud providers like Google or AWS, but not all of the information. So here's just some examples how you could label your hosts. And if you follow this kind of labeling scheme, you get a lot of more possibilities to dive into your metrics. And the same goes for the services. So just to give you an example here, so I've applied this labeling scheme. So basically, I use 3 labels here for my services, which is app, tier, and environment. And once the services are labeled like this, all the metrics that originate from these applications will be tagged in Datadog with the corresponding labels. So let's go back to the catalog. So basically what you have to do to configure this catalog item before you can deploy it is to enter your API key, of course. Then normally you want to deploy this as a global service. That means the Datadog agent runs on every host in your environment, and this has also the nice effect that when you scale your environment up by adding additional hosts, the Datadog agent will automatically be deployed on these hosts. You don't have to do anything for that. So then you would configure the labels that you're using for your hosts that you want to ingest in Datadog, which would be in this case flavor and region, and the same for the service label tags, which were tier and environment app. And the next part is the service discovery feature. So this until now we have covered the host stats and the Docker daemon stats, but if you also want to ingest application metrics in Datadog, this is where you configure the service discovery. So as I said, by default, Datadog will auto-detect a list of applications like Redis, I think MySQL, and a couple of others like etcd. But if you have another application running for which auto-discovery is not supported, then you would have to give Datadog some information about this application. And here in the catalog item, you have 2 ways to give this information to Datadog. Essentially, you have to store it in a key value store, which can be either console or etcd. In this case, I set up an etcd instance here in Rancher. And I wrote the information. So basically, it's just 3 keys that you have to configure. The directory name is the name of the image, which is Postgres. You can also add the version tag to it, but you don't have to. And the next important part is this one. So in order to dynamically configure the information about the instances of the containers on which Postgres runs, you can use template variables, and they will be expanded when the Datadog agent detects the container image. So in this case, the host will be expanded to the IP address of the Postgres container. And yeah, then the port, it's the default port, and the username. For the database, I didn't configure a password. Otherwise, you would have to supply the password as well. And yeah, so as you can see, the etcd is running in the stack etcd HA, and the service is called etcd. So we can now use the DNS service discovery to configure Datadog for the host. So this would be the DNS name for the etcd, and the rest will leave that as the default. If you're not interested in the host stats metric and you just want a standalone stats aggregator, you can use this option. This will essentially disable the Docker and host stats, but we don't want to do that. So once you have that all configured, you can deploy this catalog, and just so we don't lose any time here, I've already done that. We can maybe quickly look at the configuration. So the important thing, how does the Datadog agent get the information from the host and the Docker daemon? It's essentially that we mounted the Unix socket for the Docker daemon as a volume, and the process and the secrets. So that is all that is required. And when we talked about this meetup today, we thought we could maybe use a single application stack for all of the demonstrations. And we decided to use this example voting app from Docker. I basically use the exact same app. The only thing that I changed is because I wanted to demonstrate the Stats-D integration. The only thing I changed, okay, maybe we can look at the how this voting app looks first. So, okay, so it has an external load balancer for the front-end part. The voting app is the web application which the users hit when they cast their votes. Then we have a Redis for the worker queue. We have a worker, and that stores the result in the Postgres database, and then we have a result app for to view at the results of the votes. So the only thing I slightly changed, was the voting app. It's a Python app, and what I did, I just added the Datadog Python module here. So it's basically this 10 lines here. I pass in the DNS name of the stats-D host, which essentially is the DNS name of the Datadog agent. Right. So when you resolve this host name in Rancher, let me show this. Just yeah, so this resolves to one of the Datadog instances running on the hosts. And I pass this in as an environment variable to configure the stats-D client here. And then the only thing I added were some stats calls in the app itself. So when the user visits the web application, I increment the page views, and when the user casts a vote, I increment the votes submitted, and I also count the unique votes, because we're using a voter ID cookie here, and we can use that to get the unique votes, because users can vote multiple times.
Jan, just a quick question. Fraser asked a question a couple minutes ago. He asked, you showed mounting the volumes in Datadog. What are the security implications of the volume mounts that Datadog requires?
So previously, the Datadog image, I think, required to use in privilege mode, but that isn't the case anymore, which is a big plus on the security side. Let's look again, maybe at the configuration here. So of course, since it has mounted the Docker socket, it can, of course, I mean, the Datadog container has full access to the Docker daemon, of course. This you should be aware of. The other two mounts are read-only, so there aren't really any security implications. Yeah, I hope this answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. There was another question that the Fraser asked as well. He was saying, if you have to provide the image name to the agent, what happens when you perform a rolling upgrade to, say, a new version, and the image name is now different? Do you have to reconfigure Datadog every time?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. You can actually give just the image name without the version tag behind it. So I don't know if there's a good way to refer to that. So normally after the colon you have the version of the image, right? You can either specify a fully qualified image with the version, or you can just configure the image name without the colon. So when you version your Docker images, it won't affect the metrics collection.
Awesome. Great. Let's see the Datadog app.
Yeah. So I deployed now the voting app that I showed, and what I expect now is to get some nice stats here. Maybe everyone who's listening in, maybe you can all just cast your vote now, so we get some data into Datadog. I'm sorry that I don't have a nice domain name. So if you're able to type the IP address to the port and just cast your vote, then we would have a little bit more data in our Datadog application.
I'm going to send it out to the chat, so you'll have a link in the chat if everyone wants to just click it.
That's great.
Go in and in versus what is in? In with Datadog? I don't. I'm going in. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's not really meaningful. It's not really meaningful. Yeah.
All right, great.
Okay, so yeah, so now that we have launched the agent, I can probably show it. So you can see the Datadog agent is now deployed on every host, and if I would scale that up at another host, it would be deployed on that host as well. So let's go to the Datadog application. So maybe let's start at the bottom. Okay, so you can see it's capturing some events here from the Docker daemon. So you get some events from the Docker daemon, like image start, stop, stuff like that. And what you can also see is the labels that we created in Rancher. They have now been ingested as tags, like here, tier backend. The hosts, the host labels also as tags, and this really opens a lot of possibilities to dive into the metrics. So let's just start at the bottom. So let's start with the hosts. So these are our 3 Rancher hosts, and they're being monitored already. Again, these are the tags. So this one, I guess, was actually created by the Google Engine integration in Datadog, because this is not a label that we have in Rancher, but this one is. This one's the label that we created before. And right away you get some default dashboards for every host. You get to see some nice stats on the system level, and even some information on the containers. So how many containers currently are running on that host. And so these are the host stats, and now let's dive into the Docker metrics that we get here. So this is also like a default dashboard. Just to show you like all the metrics that you get from the Docker daemon. First you get a nice view into the running containers as opposed to stop containers. So if this is 100%, it's a good sign. And then yeah, you have of course these are all the stats that are fetched from the Docker stats API, and you can divide them by containers and see which container is the most CPU intensive, which containers consumes the most RAM, and stuff like that. But now I want to show you a dashboard that I quickly created, which I think can demonstrate a little bit how you can get a single view into your application throughout all the layers. So, as you remember, our Python app, we changed it to emit stats on the votes submitted, and we can see here that over the past hour, 423 votes were submitted, and this is also a nice number here. This shows you the total memory consumed by the application, so for all containers. And this shows another nice thing of the integration is that you get to refer to the stack names. So the rancher stack name, you can refer to it in Datadog, and it's actually a pretty simple query. So I want to get the Docker memory usage just for the voting stack, but for the whole environment. So, yeah. So this is that, and similar to that, I also have the sum of CPU usage just for this application for the whole environment. And here we have our page views.
The monitoring side looks, I mean, the stats and monitoring looks good, but you know, I think Fraser just pushed out there is like, you know, can you get into the events and notifications, you know, automation and management by exception? What, you know, can you show us some of that side of what Datadog does? We want to move. We need to move a little bit quicker through this.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay.
No problem.
So okay. So just wanted to show you that you can now in your dashboards you can now correlate the information that you get from the Docker engine and the information that you get for the applications. You know, like here we correlate the Redis latency to the votes submitted per second, and of course, important thing is also the monitoring. So it's actually pretty easy to set up new monitors with alerting. You can do that based on host information or based on the metrics. So we could just extract a metric from let's say Docker, let's say system. Let's say system mem3, and then we can say okay from everywhere, but by host, and there we have an alert as soon as then we can define a threshold. We can say when the metric is below, let's say below 100. And this gives us an alert for every host when the memory when it runs low on memory. So it's really very easy to create monitors here. And of course you could also ingest. You can also ingest custom events through the Datadog API.
Jan, there was a question that came in asking if you could do Boolean logic, like, you know, if metric 1 is less than A or metric 2 is less than B. Do you know if that's possible in your monitoring?
Yeah, I think it's possible. It's pretty extensive. It's pretty extensive.
The bake-off. I'm not sure that goes far enough, man. We need confidence. We need to know that you've done it before. Oh,
Yeah.
it looks like
So
you
yeah,
can. They're called conditional alerts according to
maybe we
Ilan
have
Rabinovich. So
maybe we have someone from the Datadog in the call. I'm pretty sure that's possible.
it looks like
It's
you
really
can.
yeah. You can really dive into all the metrics at the end and use it to define alerts. Yep. So I think that's basically it from my side.
Awesome. This was great. Any more questions out there about Datadog before we dive into Prometheus? All right. Well, I will keep. If you have more questions, Jan and I will be monitoring the question tab, and we'll dive in. Jan, thanks for showing all of
Great.
that. I know there's a lot more that Datadog does, but I think we got through quite a bit. We're gonna switch back, and now we're gonna turn it over to Ed. Ed, are you there?
I am indeed, yeah.
Okay. Let me make myself the presenter again. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, that's good.
All right. So Prometheus, the
Prometheus.
CNCF open source project.
Definitely. So I guess I'm hoping most people have sort of heard of Prometheus. It seems to have become really popular recently, especially with kind of this massive push and advent of containers with people like the guys at Rancher coming along, and obviously Docker. Now, Prometheus is a open source tool. It's a slightly different approach than the likes of Sysdig Cloud and Datadog. It's not. I think it's fair to say it's not an attempt to provide a one-stop shop for every single monitoring requirement you've got. It's more kind of built towards Unix philosophies of modular design and doing one thing very, very well. And I want to sort of run through how you fulfill all of your requirements, sort of inside and outside that scope. So if my slide master will be kind enough to, there we go. So I tried to break this out. I've sort of gone into some for, some against, some further notes. So first off, open source. Prometheus is completely free. You can download it off GitHub. You can fork it, do whatever you want to. It's completely adaptable for your needs, as a number of kind of people who are using this at crazy scale, much bigger than I've done, have done so. It's got an API, so what I mean by that is it's got an API if you wish to interrogate it, which is pretty mature now. Prometheus is version 1, I think, as of a couple of months ago. It's also got a API in the beta for data extraction, so rather than configuring integrations to extract data on a per product basis, it's on its way to creating a standardized API to extract data out. And that's really important, and I'll come on to why a little bit later. So we've got it following Unix philosophy, obviously. Now, one of the reasons I've sort of, I guess, got so involved in Prometheus is it's really easy to customize your monitoring to your applications. So we looked there at Datadog using intelligence around analyzing image names to pull back what types of applications are there. The typical use cases where I've been looking at monitoring for our clients has been around going into applications in detail and monitoring your application. So, like we saw there with Jan putting the statsd implementation into the code, Prometheus supports that, but it also supports sort of its own client libraries for recording all the kind of metrics. And I'm by no means a developer, but I've managed to write some 2 or 3 exporters myself, and the client library is available for all the kind of usual language like Python and Go and Node, etc. Yeah, so easy to instrument your code. There's a number of products which are in the process of supporting native Prometheus support. There are a number of exporters for products that don't necessarily have that. So if you want to monitor MySQL, Prometheus has a MySQL exporter, which is sort of a phrase they seem to have captured. So there's a MySQL exporter that will connect in, and it will gather all of the metrics, much like a standard monitoring agent would do, and it'll expose them out for Prometheus to scrape. And so the key thing there being Prometheus is predominantly or exclusively a pull mechanism. It's probably not worth getting into the advantages, trade-offs of pull v push, but it allows it to operate out of the outside the application's way, and it's allows monitoring to sort of operate at its own pace. And if there's any problems with monitoring, it can stay that side of things. It's fast and powerful. I think I'm going entirely off what I've heard here, but the record I think for a single server is something like 800,000 metrics per second or something stupid. It can absorb and digest an insane amount of data. And the cool thing is it's got really, really good, strong service discovery built in out of the box. So it will link in with products like Kubernetes. It will link in with DNS. It'll link into EC2. It's got a ton of ways of automatically discovering all of your hosts without you having to go and sort of modify your configuration files and things. And that's something that's just getting better and better every month, it seems. That's been improved or new integrations being added. Now, Prometheus is different, I think, than the other products for a number of reasons. If you could just skip to the next slide, please, Shannon.
Well,
So,
before you jump off there too,
sorry.
the background of Prometheus is so interesting too. I mean, this is a project that was started by the team at SoundCloud, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a lot of Google DNA in Prometheus. A lot of people who'd worked at Google, and they'd got used to the various sort of in-house solutions. I believe it was called, Borgman, and they looked saying, "Oh, we had this really cool thing when we worked at Google, and we'd like to create something new." At SoundCloud, they had the typical problem of having many generations of monitoring systems, and the guys, the kind of Prometheus core engineers, tell a great story about how that sort of came about and how SoundCloud has supported a lot of the initial development of Prometheus. Since then, though, I think it's just absolutely rocketed in popularity and usage as well. On the against, then, I think it's important to say Prometheus tries to do one thing really well, and that is give you very, very, very highly detailed metrics at huge scale, and it stores them in its own time series database, which is part of the application, and then you can query those using something they call PromQL, and it's not PromQL is a really nice and sort of shorthand way of being able to explore how your systems are behaving, and I'll show that in the demo. So on the against slide, then, what Prometheus isn't, it's the trade-off of being able to ingest such high volumes of metrics means that from a performance perspective and by the design of the product, it's not necessarily the tool you want to use for long-term capacity planning or long-term reporting. For instance, if you're doing an annual capacity report or something along those lines, this goes back to the API. You're going to want to extract that data and distill it down. And that's quite simply because the amount of data it's capturing is just untenable to keep at that range. The way systems have handled that in the past, like Cacti, is they've downsampled that data quite heavily. Prometheus doesn't sort of try to play that game, I think it's fair to say. So if you're wanting to store that data elsewhere for longer term reporting, you pull it out through the API. Against application auto discovery, so we saw some cool stuff there from Jan around Datadog being able to sort of auto discover things by looking at, I think it was the Docker events from the daemon and things. It doesn't try to do that. It's very much a tool that's very, very easy to set up. It's with the intended of you setting this up for your environment. I don't think it tries to, doesn't try and jump out of the box and cover every single bit of infrastructure you have. I think as much auto configuring is great. I think there's always a selection of manual configuration to do, and that's just kind of the expectation around how you do it. Now, the nice thing is with the service discovery that makes it really easy to do. So and not software as a service. So again, in contrast to Datadog there, I won't say too much, but I think there's probably expected to be an announcement at Weaveworks around some one of the companies, which is Weaveworks, who I believe hope to demo something around sort of a hosted version of Prometheus, if that is something of interest. They spoke about that recently at the Prometheus conference in Berlin, which I can ping out the link to the slides afterwards, actually. So I'll go straight into the sort of the demo after this and sort of talk about it there. But if you want some more info, Prometheus.io, which will give you a rundown of the project, or just go straight to the GitHub and get it. It's also on Docker Hub. One of the core engineers maintains a absolutely vital blog called Robust Perception, which is his consultancy firm, and it's got loads of handy guides and sort of useful tips for if you're coming to Prometheus or if you forget something, how it works. There's some great stuff there. I've got a link to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is, so Prometheus is the second project behind Kubernetes to be accepted in. And then there's some shameless self-promotion there. So I work for InfinityWorks. There's our main website. We're a consultancy. We do lots of stuff around Rancher and Prometheus and Kubernetes and all that kind of stuff. There's our blog and there's our GitHub. Yeah, so Shannon, it's probably time for you to hand over control. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so can people see that?
Yeah, looks good.
Cool. All right, so this should be very familiar to all of you now. I'm in a staging environment. The guys over at Rancher have kindly set me up. I've got my voting app, which is the same as the one Jan was using earlier.
Well, speaking of that, Jan, we all wanted to find out who won. I mean, I got a question. What won, in versus out? It was like 400 plus votes, and you never showed us who won. Jan, you still there? Are you muted?
Yeah, I'm here.
You're gonna have to find out who won, and then you come back and tell us.
I will check. Okay.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Voting app, Ed. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no worries. So here we are. We're in a user start. We've got our voting app, and we want some monitoring. So my sort of first interaction with Rancher and Prometheus together was at one of our clients, which I mentioned before, and we thought, hey, this is really cool. How can we kind of get it in the hands of more people? And the way we did that was through submitting a catalog entry. So I'm going to the Ranch catalog, and there's loads of stuff you can get through here, but the one we are interested in today is Prometheus. So we create a catalog entry. It's I say Prometheus and friends. Again, going back to this being a tool to do a specific job. The great thing about that is there's a community of tools out there that have embraced this and that link in and hook in. So there's a really powerful set of tools that sort of come together to form this sort of ecosystem around your monitoring now. So if I view the details of that, I've got some guns sort of explaining what each bit does. There's a version, just little tweaks as we go, and the guys upgrade Rancher and make more stuff possible. So I'm going to call my stack Prometheus. I'm not going to give it description, and I want the services to start when I've created them. I can see the config that would launch. Not too much of interest there because I'll run to that next. So if I click launch, this should then go away. And sorry, I'm super zoomed in here. I was hoping to make it readable for you guys. So here we go.
While we're waiting for it to launch up, it'd be great to just walk through the pieces that are actually launching here. You know, what all are you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Unlike obviously with the case of Datadog and Sysdig Cloud, where all the back end is sitting out hosted and managed for us. In this case, you're launching the back end as well as the monitoring agent. So, do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is what we've just launched is, or we're in the process of launching. As you can see, it's quite quick. Is an end-to-end sort of monitoring solution built off. This is very much built off a demo for people to sort of get Prometheus in their system and have a look at what it can do and how it works. It's not necessarily, the catalog entry is not necessarily intended to click the button, you've got your monitoring set up for the year. Monitoring is far more important than that. It's a sort of a starter pack. And what we've got here is we've got Prometheus itself. So we're just pulling, I think in this catalog entry version 1.2 of Prometheus. We've got the node exporter. Now the node exporter is a container that Prometheus, as it's a container, it's an application that Prometheus provide, and it extracts all of the useful host level metrics from a system. So all of your CPU, your memory, and everything like that. We've then got Grafana at the top here, which visualizes this data. So Prometheus is a, by default, supported backend for Grafana. So you can load up Grafana, and we will do shortly, and it will immediately see Prometheus as a data source, and it will start rendering all of that data. The more fruity ones we've got here, they're a bit more specific to Rancher, are Ranchai, which is my naming. I didn't get told off, so that's all right. Which is it's a HA proxy, and what it's doing is it's mapping through access to the cAdvisor that Rancher already roll out as part of their agent container. So on every box there's a Rancher agent, and inside that agent there's a cAdvisor process. What Rancher is doing is simply mapping through to that. Now, Darren alluded earlier, the Rancher 1.2 I think moves to Docker Stats natively, which means at that point this Rancher container will probably just become a Google cAdvisor container. So there's a couple of other things as well. There's a Prometheus Rancher exporter. Now this one's cool. This is one team back at InfinityWorks created, and it is effectively a integration between Prometheus and the Rancher API. So this allows Prometheus to investigate stack status, service status, host status, all things like that. So you can say, are my containers up? And they're passing health checks. And finally, InfluxDB, which is a bit of a weird one. So this is because I'm leveraging a little-known feature of the Rancher API, which allows you to configure an external Graphite endpoint. And what it'll do is when Rancher's got that configured, it will pump through all of its internal system stats about how it's running. I'm not a big fan of Graphite. I think I'll just leave it at that. And the net result is I didn't want to install Graphite, so I installed InfluxDB, which supports receiving Graphite data. So what InfluxDB there is it's just ingesting this data from the Rancher itself, which gives me insight into how Rancher's performing. Not necessarily something you should have to worry about, but it can be useful if you're troubleshooting anything. So what I'll do now is that span up quite quickly, but it's not going to have a range of historic data because I've only just deployed this. In true bake-off style, I'm hopefully going to say, here's one we prepared earlier, and I'll just go to our other environment that's been running for a number of hours. So hopefully it's got some historical data in for us to take a look at.
Hey Ed, while you're doing that, Dongyi asked if you could talk a little bit about what is the Prometheus format. He said he sees people discussing exposing metrics in a Prometheus format. Do you know anything about that?
Great question. Yeah, I do. So I'll go into that now then, actually, whilst that's loading. So the Prometheus format is effectively, Prometheus seeks to expose all of your metrics in what is effectively a key value pair in a plain text page. So this here is an example of, I believe this is cAdvisor. So cAdvisor supports Prometheus out the box. Here it's explaining each one of its metrics out. So I'm looking here, this line that I've highlighted, I'll try and make that a little bit larger. I'm looking at container, CPU seconds total, and that's for the system slice for console setup service. This is fairly detailed in that it's one of the more verbose exporters, because cAdvisor, as Darren mentioned before, is really powerful. And this sort of metric format is just a really nice way to be able to for Prometheus to then come along and scrape this data. And the cool thing about that is when you instrument your code, you can either make use of the Prometheus client libraries, which is what I've typically done, or you can simply write it yourself to produce a page like this. And one thing that was very cool recently, actually, is Kubernetes has added or is in beta with experimental native Prometheus support, so that you can get all that kind of data straight out of Kubernetes and you just point Prometheus at it. And there is a pull request in with Docker, which is due to go to an experimental build of Docker any day now that will give Docker Prometheus metrics straight out of the box as well. So straight away for people using stuff like Rancher or Kubernetes and whatever your scheduler is, you can get at those stats without having to run any agents in that case. It's all just natively provided, and it's really low cost as well. So I'm here in the production live environment with my voting app, and of course lots of users. I won't go into the voting app. I think we saw it in Jan's demo there, but this is it's the same application that I've got deployed there. And I've also got Prometheus deployed. So here, I'll load up Prometheus first. So if I click this link, this takes us here. So this is the Prometheus front end. It's not particularly snazzy, and quite like that. It loads very fast, and it's a very easy way for me to instantly explore all the metrics on my system. Before I do, I'll just quickly take a look at some of its configurations. So if I go to targets, I can see how Prometheus is scraping each of my endpoints, when its last scrape was. So I've got these in general on here, I think on a 16-second interval for being scraped. So that's metrics every 15 or 16 seconds. You can lower that down, raise it up, obviously, just depending on how, whether you want to store more data for a shorter period or less data for a longer period. I can see my configuration for Prometheus here. So I won't spend too long looking at this, but it's effectively just a YAML file where I'm saying I've got container metrics job here, which is a label within Prometheus, which I'll show you shortly, and it's got a DNS service discovery config. So it's looking there in Rancher. So it's saying to Rancher's DNS service, wherever I've got Rancher running, I want you to return me all the A records and connect to it on port 9104. And then straight away, wherever we've got the C advisor running or Rancher running, I can immediately get all of that data, whether you add or remove hosts, because that's part of Rancher's ability to globally schedule a container. So if I go to
just a couple questions that came in. Do you have a second? Let me just
yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yeah, if I'm going too quick as well, pull me up.
No, you're doing great. Sven asked the first question. He was saying, he noticed that in Datadog and Prometheus, they both display the ID of the container instead of its real name. Is it possible to change that behavior to favor a more clear container names approach?
Good question. Yes, I believe it is, because Prometheus supports the ability to rewrite stuff. So as you ingest data, it supports the ability to rewrite it, potentially. I'm not sure if that's just a C advisor thing that we're picking up that naming. But yeah, so probably one we pick up offline. But in essence, I do believe it is possible. Yes.
Awesome. And the other question was from Martin, and Martin Bauer, and he asked, he said the initial Prometheus front end is very, very minimal. Can we have
Absolutely.
predefined front end of metrics and switch between? And I think you're probably going to jump into Grafana, which ends up being often the front end people
Absolutely.
use more.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and it's case in point. Like Prometheus isn't going to be any more useful to you if it had lots of pictures of cakes on the front screen. This is literally an interface for you to interrogate your data. An example of which, if I want to look at node statistics, I've just typed N and also start complete what's here. And have a look at all of these statistics being pulled from the node exporter. Let's say I'm interested in the node load 1 metric, which is the 1 minute load average metric for the host. If I execute that, I straight away get the values for my hosts. Now, nobody's using this, so these values are quite low. I can graph that directly here as part of my troubleshooting phase. This isn't ever expected to be a dashboard. This is where you would branch out and use those queries in Grafana. But for interrogating data and looking at how a system's performing, this might be where you do that. I've got some sample queries. If I just minimize that slightly here. So some cool queries we might want to run. So this one's a bit of a mouthful, but this is I'm saying Prometheus here, I want you to give me the top 3 container CPU usage metrics for all these hosts, and it will give me I'm calculating the 5-minute rate here. Again, a little bit difficult to extrapolate this because I've got no load through the system. I can query we mentioned before the integration with Rancher. So I can say, hey, how are the Rancher hosts doing? And it's returning back here. It's saying I'll just make that a bit bigger. It's saying Rancher hosts, here's your instance, the job name, which is the name we defined in the config, and then the name of the host as Rancher sees it that's presented through the API. So here I can straight away see that the hosts are online according to the Rancher API, which means they're in an active state. I can do the same thing for services, which are the individual containers. So I can see here voting Postgres, for instance, it's got a status of 1. And the cool thing about this is because Rancher defines a state of a service based on not only the container running, but whether it's passing a health check, means that I know straight away that this container is up and running and is sort of performing as I would expect, which is pretty cool. I can look at more detailed metrics. So if I look at node CPU here, this is very much more detailed. This is showing me all of the, so I've got the node CPU is giving me all of the data for every single core, every single instance, and for every single mode that I want. Now, the cool thing here is you can start to really dig down into multi-dimensional data. You can start to compare different sort of CPU profiles across your different hosts. This is something we found especially useful if we've got different. We had a situation where we had lots of hosts and some were of a slightly older generation CPU set. We could dive down in detail and compare the performance between the two CPU sets. And that helped us inform a decision around sort of how important it was to decommission the older sets and what impact that was having. So there's some really detailed data you can kind of get through here. But as I said before, this is an interface for you to investigate. It's not necessarily something for a dashboard, and that's where Grafana comes in. Everyone
Before you
loves
jump
Grafana.
off of there, what you're showing there, I mean, it definitely makes a lot of sense for that investigate. I think you talked earlier about, what it would be like to try and look at this over long time periods and to do sort of capacity planning. I'm guessing that would be pretty resource intensive. So what would the performance be like if you're trying to look at this over months or to try and understand the broader implications of some of these things?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, typically there's a configuration file value. I might get this wrong. I think by default it's set to retain data for, I think it's 2 weeks at that kind of level. So, one of the things you'd have to look at in your environment, how many metrics are you ingesting? Here I'm ingesting a tiny amount of metrics. It's a simple demo system. It could probably run for a very long time. The actual performance of Prometheus is always pretty quick, up to quite a much larger scale than I've necessarily had to go to. In terms of if you wanted to get at that data for a longer period, yeah, you're right. So Prometheus is operating predominantly in memory, and it's operating off a very smart kind of time series database. That sort of breaks down if you start to connect to a disk for complex queries. As soon as you start hitting the disk, that additional latency means that the user experience would drop and Prometheus would start to sort of struggle along as it retrieved those user queries. I think that's where the point you set to extrapolate that data out, and maybe you get something as detailed as something like Amazon do with the cloud metrics that they provide. They're quite sparse, but suitable for storing for a much longer time. But again, that would be something you do outside of at least the core Prometheus product. There is some other stuff in the community springing up, though. There's other projects out there where people are looking at doing this as projects where there's people are ripping this data and throwing it into Kafka for sort of capacity analysis and reporting as well. There's sort of plenty happening in that space.
Okay. A couple quick questions other questions that came in.
Yeah,
Fraser asks kind of sort of a similar question. It says if Prometheus is gathering huge amounts of data, where does it go? You mentioned a time series database. What is that? Is it proprietary? Can it be anything? And B, how do you figure out sizing for data storage? If Prometheus is intended for short term, is there a policy for overwriting, archiving, etc.? So kind of a long question, but where do you put the data and how do you manage it?
I think on some of that, I think for the archiving, I'd have to say, in all honesty, probably one to ask the Prometheus mailing list. So there's an IRC channel, there's a community page when you go to Prometheus.io with their kind of IRC details, mailing lists, all that kind of stuff. That's probably a question for those because I don't want to give the wrong answer. And sorry, what was the first part again, Shannon?
It was just what's the time series database, and is it proprietary? Is it just?
It is, yeah. It's proprietary. And it's all open source and stuff, but it is part of the Prometheus product. So it operates in a similar way to things like OpenTSB, but it's more optimized. there's a fantastic talk actually by one of the core engineers. He did it the Prometheus conference. I'll try and get you the link, Shannon, to paste it out, where he talked about exactly in detail how that works and why it works in that way. And they do some really, really smart stuff around lowering the cost of storing a metric and all sorts of calculation. It's way over my head, but it's really, really interesting stuff. Shannon, I'll send you the link after I finish the demo. And you can,
okay, thanks. Yeah, that's great. And so the InfluxDB that's in the deployment isn't that. That InfluxDB is used for just Grafana purposes.
No. So yeah, I'll show you that in a second. That's a one-off. I've subsequently thought about removing that, if I'm honest, because I think it probably confuses people. But it's sort of handy to be there, and I know a number of people do use it. You should probably say the Prometheus catalog entry we've got is it's insanely popular. I think we've somewhere between 20 and 25,000 pulls of that, sort of judging by the metrics on the Docker Hub, which is crazy. It's I don't think any of us expected it to be that popular. Yeah, so where was I? I was going to show you Grafana. Are you okay, Shannon, if I go there, or any questions before I proceed?
There are actually quite a few questions.
Shoot.
Yeah, so one of them was, is there any way to query container and stack label metadata? Michael asked that question.
Yes. Let me think about the question a second. Hold on. So generally anything. So Prometheus has the concept. I don't want to go too much in detail on this because it's quite a complex subject. But Prometheus here, if we look at one of these outputs, has the concept of these labels, and these labels give Prometheus the ability to display multi-dimensional data. In that we can look at this data as it's outputted here, and we can sort of group and sort and analyze against data with the same sort of fields. So here, if we look at the node CPU, I've got a CPU of 0, I've got an instance label, I've got a job label, and I've got a mode label. So if I hate writing stuff like this, but if I say I'm interested in node CPU and I'm interested in mode equals idle, then I've of course made a terrible error. I need to put this in quotes because I'm a bad person. So there we go. That'll give me all of the idle returns. You can start to do some really funky stuff here with the multi-dimensional data, including like group left, group right type functions. Some of the brains behind Prometheus are very strong on their mathematics. I'm not, so I'm not going to go down that road and tempt the demo gods too much. I'll sort of leave that one there.
Do you know if there's any way to export data out of Prometheus to another database?
Yes. So there was a talk Brian Brazil gave recently. He's one of the core engineers in Leeds, and in that he talked about that. So as I understand it, I'll probably need to check this. At the moment there is beta support for a new data output API. So I think previously there were some integrations with existing databases. I think that's been scrapped in favor of having a single product agnostic API where data can sort of be taken out of Prometheus. And that's because Prometheus is very much seen as being a focused cog in a machine of, an ecosystem of tools that you use to monitor and report in your environment.
Great. And then another question, Neal asked, do people auto-expire in Prometheus, but stream all events out to the longer term, for example? I think does that make sense? So do you auto-expire?
Yeah, it does. And I think, they do. I think Prometheus will auto-expire the data anyway for you. I think, and yeah, people do take that data and stream it out to things like I mentioned before, like, Kafka, Cassandra or whatever. People do look at larger, longer-term data stores and put that information out to it. The thing you lose is you're going to lose that native performance of being able to pull really complex queries and analyze them on the fly, which can drive stuff like your dashboards and your when you're investigating an issue. You kind of want that responsiveness and that ability to see that stuff in real time. But for capacity analysis and reporting, obviously that's what that's the sort of route you go, I think.
Awesome. Guys, just I know we're over at about an hour and a half now, and we still have a lot of content to go with Sysdig till to go. So there's some more questions. I'll try to answer the questions in chat, but why don't we keep moving if we can hit the
Okay,
Grafana
yeah,
stuff and then.
absolutely. Like I said, there's I put some links up before. I'll send some more to Shannon as well. There's a ton of information about this. There's been, especially this year, there's been a load of sort of conferences and blogs and things where the guys on the Prometheus core team who know it far better than I, and probably elaborate it in a better way, will sort of run through deep dives into the storage and the labels and everything like that. But yeah, so for the sort of reviewing the catalog entry and where we were just taking a look at, so as part of the containers we've deployed Grafana. Grafana's here. I've just loaded that in the browser, and this is the one on the environment that's been running for a few hours, so we have some historic data. So this Grafana instance comes pre-packaged with some dashboards, and if we look at host stats, for instance, this is a Grafana dashboard demoing collecting all of the node information that Ranch has got. So I'll make that full screen for you guys so you can see it a bit easier. So what we're doing here is we're looking at things like load average, node procs, available memory, total memory, memory free, memory available, which is a different statistic than memory free, and I won't go into that. One of the cool things as well is Grafana supports templating. So here there's a dynamic list built of all of the hosts, and I can sort of select data from one or many of them to interrogate. And Grafana is really the sort of where people visualize this sort of information. So I'm pulling stuff from load average and memory. I'm also looking at some more interesting stuff. So I'm looking at the host health in Rancher. So if you remember before, I was looking at the Rancher_hosts. This table here for host health is just representing that data, and I'm telling Grafana to sort of color in those cells based on whether or not that's a problem. You can also, so we looked at the queries before. They are conditional queries in that you can, we talked a little bit in the Datadog run through about, can you apply logic on those? You absolutely can here. And with all that logic, whatever query you write, you can then configure that to be an alert. Now, I've not configured alerting on the template that goes out, and that's simply because I wanted to try and have as few options as possible when a person deployed this, so that they could sort of get on board and start using it. To configure alerting is really easy. There's an application on Prometheus GitHub called Alert Manager. It receives the alert from Prometheus, and it will fire it to Slack or PagerDuty or whatever service you want to use, or emails, traditional if you want to go that way. And it can do all sorts of stuff around. Alert Manager as an individual product has got all sorts of clever logic around detecting when there's a flurry of alerts and grouping them and silencing hosts and all that kind of good stuff you'd expect from an alerting system. If I have a look at some of the other dashboards then, so we talked about pulling back data from the API. Again, this is pulling back the status of some of those services from the Rancher API. We've also got Rancher stats, so this is going to be visualizing everything that's coming out of that central Rancher service. So we can see the Rancher service has been up 21 hours, there's a load average of 0.3 on the box, and this is all information that Rancher exposed. Now, hopefully Darren's still listening. I'm sort of hoping to bend his ear that he'll add native Prometheus metrics for this sort of stuff, and then that would allow people to sort of scrap having this InfluxDB or a Graphite installation. And like we saw before, you'd just be able to get this from a very simple metrics page as well.
That is definitely on the roadmap. So
awesome, perfect.
Your bending works well.
Well, it's joining the gang. You don't want to be left out with Docker and Prometheus heading that direction. Cool. So yeah, we looked at Rancher stats there. Just quickly. Oh, that's awesome, isn't it? My Alexa just put it in. If I look at Prometheus stats, so Prometheus, of course, what would it do with the monitoring system? It monitor itself. I can see things like how long the scrape duration for the targets are taking, how long rule validation is taking, and all that kind of stuff, and how many samples have been ingested. So at the moment, it's doing sort of 600 a second or something. That's not really very much. But again, we're just demoing a simple system really there.
So let's
And
kill.
yeah,
Somebody suggested this in the meetup, but let's do it. Let's kill a couple containers and see what happens.
yeah, that's a great idea. So if I go to the, well, we could kill a host if you want.
Yeah, why not?
Switch it up a little bit.
Yeah,
So if
exactly.
we go to the swing host stats already, we're looking at all of the hosts. I'm slightly zoomed in here. Normally this fits quite well on a 42-inch screen. So if I zoom out slightly, here we've got the host health status of Rancher. If I go to the, I don't have access to these hosts, Shannon, so I'm just going to shut it down in here.
Okay.
If that's all right with people.
Or maybe just kill the container. Kill a container might be a little easier since you don't have access to the hosts.
All right. Okay. Fair point. So if I look at the board here and I look at the stack status of Prometheus, so here I'm monitoring the health status of all of those containers. If we look at the node exporter, for instance, now there is a downside here in that Rancher is often very good at recovering a service. And I remember in one client we were doing some non-functional testing, and when they failed a service, it was recovered in Rancher faster than the interface would recognize it. Because obviously I've got that scrape duration set quite low at kind of 15 seconds, and by the time that scrape happened, it had already recovered. Hopefully we won't hit that today. So if I look here, I'm looking at the host view, and I can see the individual containers. If I go on here and I stop this container, yeah, you see it just recovered it really fast.
Hold on a second. I'll try and help you out. Hold on.
You going to cause some destruction?
You kill off a host, Bill?
Yeah, I can try and kill one.
Ooh, fun.
It's like a live chaos monkey, isn't it?
It is. Well, while we're waiting for
Well,
that, Sven had a question while he's killing. Is it possible to
Yeah.
use the host names instead of the internal IP addresses that is given by Rancher in Prometheus?
The host names for what? Sorry, for
The host name instead of the IP address, I'm guessing for the hosts.
oh, is this? I'm presuming you're talking about here whilst I'm looking at the sort of contextual information inside Grafana. Yes, it absolutely is. So Prometheus supports the relabeling I sort of touched on earlier, and that allows you to. So here it's just looking at the. Here it is collected by default because of the way I've got it configured. It's gone away and collected that IP. You can either change it so that it connects to the DNS, the actual DNS name, or you could have Prometheus translate that name in place of the IP, because it's a field that it already has visibility of. So yes, you absolutely could. It's just not done in this. Maybe that's a good recommendation for the next update to that template, actually.
Cool. All right, Bill, did you manage to shut down a host?
Yeah, 6 should be powering down. Or 6 is powered down, so it should show up negative soon.
Cool, awesome. Well, yeah, so I'll leave this on and make sure appropriate. Oh, my computer's slowing down. Can you guys still hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, I think Chrome's just having a moment.
Too many lives.
This is just
at the same time.
Yeah, well, this is my MacBook. It's been giving me it's been a pain all day, and I think it's because it knows its replacement's about to be announced. Good riddance. This one's done. Yeah, I think this tab's not working. I'll just I'll load that in another window. So yeah, everything's all right there still. If we look at the so Rancher still thinks they're active, or has that one crashed too?
Let's find out.
I'm wondering if if Bill's restarting my computer here or one of the hosts.
Yeah, did you say you killed 6 or something else, Bill?
6. I killed 6. Or I just powered it off, so it should have gone down.
Yeah, I think it's my my computer. I think, yeah.
Is it the Prometheus live or stage?
Oh, I just saw it reconnecting, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, it's reconnecting.
It's reconnected now. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so Ranch has detected that that host's failed, which means the next time this goes away and scrapes that, which should be in the next sort of 15 seconds, that will update to show that that's down. So if I look here and I'm looking a bit more real time, last 5 minutes, and what we can do is we can, instead of waiting for the Grafana to update there, we can say Rancher hosts. You can say, right, what are you getting? So yeah, at last scrape, that one was online. So we look at the targets. Oh, there we go. It's gone down. So the reason there's 2 failures here is the endpoint 104.155.161.15 blah 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 is the container metrics that I'm pulling through RanchEye, and that's the C advisor. So there was a C advisor container on that host that Prometheus can't contact. And here this one is the host metrics, so that's the Prometheus node exporter that we're looking to gather. And then if we go back to the graph, then that should, this is where it of course doesn't work, but yeah, so that's still showing as 1 for some bizarre reason. So there you go, that's a bug in the exporter that we've written, but hey. So that's not, I don't think that's going to show as offline for whatever reason. So yeah, that's one for me to take away.
All right. Well, thanks for all of that. I think we got most of that from what you're showing. Let's turn it over now to Bill. I think it's time. Thank you, Ed, for all of that. That was great. Bill, are you still there?
I am.
All right, so we're 2 out of 3. We've got about another 15, 20 minutes to bang through this. So let's see if we can go a little bit faster through these. I'm going to make you the presenter, Bill. And do you want to just share your slides, or do you want me to go through the slides first?
I think I don't have them open, so if you can go through it.
Okay. Sure, I will go through it.
Thank you.
Presenter. Show my screen. Can you guys see mine?
Yes. No, I can. Cool. So the third monitoring tool we're looking at today is Sysdig Cloud. This is Sysdig's hosted offering. I think they have an on-premise solution, and I'm not part of their lore or anything, but I believe they started with like a command line utility that really focused on digging deep into Linux systems, and so they sort of built that out into containers and then ultimately built a hosted solution, Sysdig Cloud. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. And so it's a pretty slick interface, and I really enjoy using it. The thing about it is they've been container native since the very beginning. When I first started using it, they pretty much started, containers were supported right out of the box, and so they've been kind of growing right along with the ecosystem for containers, and being able to probe and get inside them has been kind of one of their key things from the very beginning. And they've continued to evolve that, and so as the orchestration systems have come online, they've started being able to interpret the metadata from those systems to sort of give you conceptual views of like the services and in your applications. Really, when you're running a bunch of containers, it's less, I mean, there's still host considerations, but it's, from an application standpoint, it's less about the host. It's more about, is your service up and running and functioning, and are you hitting, your SLAs from like response times and things of that nature. So being able to get this service level view from the orchestration system and those concepts is really very powerful. And then they also have been working pretty hard on getting the auto discovery of some of the more common apps that people use. And if they can't auto-discover it, they have some built-in plugins that you can configure to access your application. Next. And so this is a couple of screenshots, and we'll dive into it. But what they are able to do is just kind of give you the time series used and build dashboards. And one of the other things that I've seen that's been unique to them has been the visualization of like network response times and sort of the connectivity between each of the containers on different hosts. And so you can kind of get this topological view of your application and your environment that's running all of these containers. And so that's been a really useful tool when you're just trying to get a high-level overview of kind of what's going on in your environment. And so now, I think demos are probably the more fun thing to do. Let's jump into one of those.
Oh boy. All right, I'm going to make you the presenter.
Okay.
All right, you should be able to share your screen.
All right, let me know if you can see it.
Yes, I can.
All right. Cool. So what we're looking at here is the voting app that we've been looking at and the others. It's just kind of your simple, straightforward voting app that we've all agreed to use. We've got a few hosts here. And so to deploy deploy Sysdig is very straightforward. We have the catalog entry for it. They don't really require much in the way of questions. The thing to keep in mind is the host headers have to be, or the headers need to be on the servers that this is getting deployed to. It's sort of the one prereq. So I like to give you your access key that you get from the Sysdig UI, and I like to tag it gives you the option to tag your environment. So I like to, this is the October Meetup live, and it's comma separated, so I can say, you can give it different metadata tags so that you can sort of filter and slice and dice later on. And if you were to use the additional configurations, you can add the YAML here, and this will help. This will configure like those integrations in the agent, and it's very nice and useful. And you can see here, let's launch that. And so this is just a regular global service, and it's putting the agents out across all of the hosts. So now, it took over. Sorry, where's logging out of this one. This is the main entry point to their UI. And so this is the Explore tab, which is where you kind of poke around at all of the various metrics that are being picked up in the environment. And so here, we just launched the Meetup. And this is 2-hour resolution, so bring it down. And these hosts that we just deployed should start coming in. What did I call those? Not what I wanted to see. Yeah. So anyway, here is a Meetup version. The environment, it gets tagged, and here they have some pre-packaged ways to sort of view your containers and your applications and your hosts. I typically give it an environment label, and that gives me a quick view to see the environment. And then I have the host names because I like to see what the hosts are, and then they support container labels out of the box. So we just grab the Rancher stack service name, and so I'm now able to quickly visualize and get like a hierarchical view of what's going on the hosts and see which services are where. And this gives me an overview of kind of a host to service view. Another good way to do this is to kind of flip it where you take the host out and then you just look at your service views, and then you can get stats across the whole environment just for that service. So there's several different ways to slice it, and so just kind of using either the built-in labels or adding your own metadata gives you a really good way to kind of get into this. So here we got this. I deployed, I think this is the environment. Yeah, I deployed the, oh, here's the live one. It finally showed up. So here's the live environment. One of the cool things I did, this is a staged version of the same thing, but I deployed the StatsD version that Jan had used in his demo. And what's cool about this is basically, if I understand if they're still doing it this way, but you don't actually really need a target for your StatsD. You just throw StatsD to localhost, and the Sysdig agent actually watches for like the kernel calls, so it's able to get those stats without really needing any other type of collector. And so it grabs them, and it doesn't need any other configuration. So just by pointing it at localhost, the Sysdig agent is able to start getting at these stats, which is pretty cool. So then they give you kind of the ability to quickly get into building dashboards and just kind of visualizing your data. So I think like a good way to start is, they have the common applications, and so what I'll do is, given the app is kind of a database tier, Redis tier, Java app, if you start with kind of one of the apps that you know are in there already, this one is, looking at Redis, and we didn't do anything to configure it when we launched the app, and it's just able to reach in and start looking at that. And so this way is usually a pretty good one to just kind of start kind of a dashboard. Pin it, and so that adds that. And then they've got the Java app, so we can look quickly and grab the JVM, and it grabs stats for that. And again, this is all sort of without any additional configuration by me. And so now we can go and grab this dashboard, and it'll start rendering this stuff over time, and you'll be able to kind of, yeah, there it is. And so we'll be able to kind of see over time in this dashboard now. I can save it and come back to it later and get this high-level overview of what's going on in the environment. The other cool thing is you can look at services. You can see like your HTTP overview and get kind of it just watches for any of these types of requests, and then is able to just start tracking this over time and give you graphs without doing anything. The day of web browsers not being great today, huh? And so any one of these dashboards or any one of these panels on the dashboard, you can quickly come and create an alert from it. You can say this request average is over, 5, and then have it the agent tag. Pick any of these. You can pick different segments to look at, and then a time range if it spikes over for that duration. One of the cool things now is you can have it capture when this alert triggers. You can have it do a Sysdig capture for 60 seconds, and then it'll store that data, and that'll give you a really comprehensive point in time view of your environment at that moment. And so you can kind of get more into what's happening and where are your bottlenecks. It's a really powerful feature that I'm still exploring, but I'm sure the Sysdig folks can dive into that deeper.
One of the questions, Bill, that just came up on the alerting was, does Sysdig have a Slack integration? Sean asked that. Is that, you showed there export to email. Is there a way to just Slack that to you?
I'm not 100% on that.
I just got a response from someone from Sysdig saying, yes, it does. So there you go.
That's great. Cool. It's on my list of things to start adding. I have not done it yet. The other cool thing...
Is there any way you could show that Sysdig capture? I mean, that sounds really cool. Is there anywhere where you have an example of that? Otis was asking.
I actually don't know how to just force one. But here we're looking at this topology overview, and so you can see, you can start zooming in at like a host level, and you can see the individual containers. As you zoom in, you get more and more detail. You can see where the containers are, what they're talking to. You can see branches talking to itself, and so you get this cool topological view that you can kind of zoom into and see which containers, I think down to the process, are running and what's going on in your environment. And this is cool to give you kind of like that quick overview of your environment and take a look at sort of what's happening and what's going on. And you can drill down into with great detail.
I guess if you go on the Sysdig, I think you should be able to show the captures if you go up to the Sysdig thing. One of the guys was saying if you go to Sysdig at the top and click on, you should be able to see the capture stuff there is where all those would be. I don't think we've got any set up, so that's why you won't see it, but we'll share out a link.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. So one of the other things that Sysdig has done recently, here's all their various applications that you can integrate with. And so like if you were to do the Postgres and you had that username and password, that would be where you could get that. Here is another environment where we've got our Kubernetes deployment. And so the Sysdig agent, we're working on getting this as a Kubernetes catalog entry. It should be in relatively quickly here in the next couple of days. At the latest. And so here we've got a Kubernetes environment, and when I log into this version, hopefully.
Hey, Bill, while you're pulling that up, there was a question that came in. Is the Sysdig open source tool deployed by default as part of the Rancher catalog deployment?
The open source tool is in the catalog. It's not deployed by Rancher by default, but in the community catalog, if you go and select that, it is deployable. I don't think it's in the Kubernetes catalog yet, but if this is the command line utility, and so to deploy that, it's got the same requirement for the kernel headers. And then it's deployed globally. So once you deploy this, it'll put the command line utility in a container on every host. And then you can log onto the box or go through the shell and the UI and start digging in with the Sysdig command line utility.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool. So this is just out of the box their Kubernetes integration. So just quickly, they're able to give you a nice high-level overview. You can see your pods. You can see services, and this is all just looking at the orchestration metadata, so that it can give you this this view of your environment without having to configure much. You can quickly get into seeing at a high level what's going on and start digging into problems from there. So powerful integration.
Awesome.
So that's kind of the high level walkthrough of the Sysdig.
And you've been using this now in production for what, a year? Is about right?
Yeah, whenever we've got systems that we run, we use this to monitor them, and so I think over the next bit we'll start ramping up using it even more. We like this tool. The other day we were talking to them, and we learned that everything is API driven, and so using the API, if you had a pre-canned dashboard template in your provisioning environments, then you could quickly deploy a dashboard for that environment as you did this, and then you would be able to log in and quickly see it. So that was kind of a powerful feature for being able to have automated deployment pipelines, and then also kind of integrate your monitoring solution as you're deploying things out. So that's certainly something we're going to be looking at going forward.
Awesome. All right. Well, are there any other questions specifically on Sysdig? If there are, last chance to get them in. Otherwise, we're going to jump in and start wrapping up. Okay. Well, let's see. Hopefully, you can all see my screen. All right. So last couple things. This was a lot of fun. We covered a lot of things. It was hopefully, what you saw here is these aren't experts on the products. These aren't people from those companies. Everyone here is a user of the tool and a fan of the tool, and they're really showing it to you from the perspective of someone who uses it on a regular basis. So we'd love to get feedback from everyone. We're going to run a little poll now. I'm just going to open it up. So you should be able to answer. Then we'll share out the results as people pick their answers. The reality is, they are very different, but in a lot of ways, we know a lot of people are very successful with all of these tools. So fire away, choose the thing you're interested in, and give us a couple more seconds. We'll let the poll close. I would definitely say that the more we've played with these different tools, everyone sort of finds that the investment of time you put into them sort of seems to be paid off over time. The more you work on it and configuring it, you get a lot more value, and there's a lot of expertise that you can develop as you start to understand how they're capturing stuff and how to configure events. But going to leave this open for 10 more seconds just to get a few more votes in. Looks like we've got a lot of votes in, and I'm going to close it now. All right, so we're going to share the results. Looks like, let's see, hope everyone can see the results. It looks like, there's a lot of interest in Prometheus, which is probably not surprising. It's open source and free, and it, for a lot of people, it's a very easy way to get up and going without a lot of investment. Sysdig, Datadog, they all look good, seem like they were interesting as well. So great feedback. I'm glad everyone was able to kind of review this and give us your thoughts on it. Definitely, especially with tools like Prometheus that are open source, there's probably a little more investment. You can see the amount of work that goes in. Ed will probably be the first to tell you that there's a little bit of a learning curve that you need to go through, and there's a little bit more self-management that's absolutely needed. But once it's in place, you can really do a lot with it. We're kind of going long, so I'm not going to run a lot longer on this. A few things really quickly. Both Datadog and Sysdig offer free trials. If you haven't tried them, please sign up. Sysdig especially gave us a trial code to hand out. If you just go to sysdig.com/rancher-monitoring, you can get a double the normal free trial length, so you can try for 30 days. instead of just 2 weeks. I think Datadog offers a 2-week trial, so you can go in there and give it a try. The other few things, just if you haven't already set up Rancher, by all means, you can get started with Rancher very easily. Just go to GitHub or rancher.com/getting started and set up a Rancher environment. It's a great place to start deploying some of your first applications and working on these tools. The other thing I did want to mention, we have some upcoming training coming on in the next couple months. The first one is in Europe in November. There's another one in December. If you want to spend a couple days really getting deep into deploying and managing applications with containers, we're running these 2-day sessions. They're almost full, so if you're interested, please sign up quickly. Otherwise, you can find info on that at the link below, and or just send us a note at info@rancher.com, and we'll make sure you get the information to join those. But these are sort of 2 days classroom certification level training, so a lot going on there. After that, I just want to thank the guys for all of the questions. There's a few for all the presentations and comments. There's I think going through tools like this, you get to see kind of different approaches to solving the same problems, but hopefully it gives everyone an idea that this stuff is quite real. All of this is going to be recorded. We're going to put it out there. I think there was a question from Nassif about pricing and stuff, so we'll answer all the questions that are coming in now. It looks like there's lots of questions still coming in, but for anybody who wants to drop, we're going to record the rest of this. The whole thing will be recorded. It'll be up on YouTube later this week, and we'll send it out to everyone. But a couple more questions that came in, so let's dive into a few of these questions. There's the first one was a question that came in from Michael, and he was asking, we're a company running multiple production workloads in the cloud. This was a while ago we asked it, and they're using New Relic for its APM capabilities, and they seem to integrate well with containers. Why are they not included in your list of tools? It's a great question, Michael, and I think New Relic to this point hasn't been especially popular for container monitoring. They haven't done a lot of container level monitoring. Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about New Relic? I think you've looked at it in the past a little bit. Do you want to talk about what they do at the container level? Anything you know on there?
I'm actually not too familiar with their container level stuff. We haven't looked at it in a while.
Okay. Does anybody else want to talk about it that maybe has spent any time with it? Well, I can just tell you, the last time I was with a user that was looking at it, I think the perception was it gave you, had great APM level metrics, good host metrics, things like that, but it really didn't provide the level of detail of understanding the container, what was going on within the container. So it may have changed. From what you're saying, it sounds like maybe there's some new capabilities there, so probably worth additional investigation. But thanks for the great question, Michael. There's another question that Nassif asked about pricing models for each of these tools. The pricing models for these are really based on consumption, or they're open source. So pricing for Datadog and Sysdig are based on the amount of nodes and hosts that you're running in your environment. I don't have the exact pricing. I think they publish some of it, and others you probably need to talk to them. But obviously for Prometheus, it's free. It's open source software. There is going to be, I think, a Prometheus hosted service launching sometime soon, and there are companies who are offering kind of commercial support from Prometheus that are probably going to be popping up in the near term. So it's kind of developing a little bit of an ecosystem around it. But for now, at least everyone I'm aware of using Prometheus is basically using the open source version and managing it themselves. Other questions that have come in. Let's see. There is. It sounds like there will be some new announcements. Someone mentioned there's going to be some new announcements about New Relic coming soon, so that's good to know. And someone else had the opinion that New Relic is just damn expensive. So there you go. The community speaks. All right, everyone. If there aren't any more questions, we're going to wrap up. This was a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll do more like this, where there's a lot of things we're looking to do similar topics on. If you have topics you'd like to present or you'd like to suggest, please email. You can email me at shannon@rancher.com or hit me on Twitter anytime with ideas for the meetups. We're going to be diving right back into infrastructure stuff probably next month as we get into more details on some of the pluggable networking and how pieces like that are working. And someone else says we need a Slack channel. So I think that's a good suggestion that we should probably make happen sooner rather than later. So thank you all for coming today. Thanks for everyone for presenting. Ed, Jan, Bill, thanks for taking so much time to prepare those demos and to go through it. Thanks a lot. We will all talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.